Hi and welcome back to another video from Effective Dashboards. In this video I'd like to cover the matrix visual, and we're going to cover how to configure the matrix visual and also some hints and tips that I use and have found quite successful in the past. Okay, so let's get started. So the matrix visual is one that I use quite a lot. If you've been used to using pivot tables in Excel, then it's very similar to a pivot table. And yeah, so we've added it in. Here's the actual the icon there. And if we just start off with the field well, it's got three different fields available. It's got rows, it's got columns, it's got values. So rows along the side, columns along the top, and then values are the aggregated measures or values that are contained within the actual matrix itself. So let's go and add in some information or some data. So we've got work order data here, and each record is a work order, and I'm going to add in a department, and each department has got a list of people that work for that department, and each one of those has got a discipline or a special skill or a trade skill. So we're going to add that in here under department, and then in columns we're going to look at the work order status code. So each work order has got a different status that represents how its position in the flow from being created to being scheduled to being executed to being closed off. So this just represents the different discrete status codes that a work order can be at any point in time. Okay, so the key thing here is that we've got columns and we've got rows, and then the value, well, we're going to have got a measure here. In fact, we'll use work order count, and this is going to be just a simple measure that's already part of this data model here. Now, if you want to build this dashboard, I will leave a link below, and if this actual end product here will be available to download off of the actual resources site as well. Another link below for that. But this one here, count rows, and we're just going to count the number of rows where we've filtered the records for anything in backlog. So if anything is in backlog equals 1. So a fairly straightforward measure here, just returns a number. And we're going to add that into the values. And it goes. So we can see here for drilling we've got 2 work orders that are in progress, and if we extend it out we've got one of those that are for the construction crew and one of these are the actual drilling crew themselves. So that's the kind of idea behind it. Okay, so let's start getting into configuring this matrix. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click across the Format tab. We're just going to work through each one of these different options. So in here we've got just the X and Y position and the width and height if you want to be a bit more precise for how you're setting this up. This is common to all visuals. And again, we've got this maintain layer option. I've created a video on how this can be used, and it just stops visuals coming to the front if you click on them, so it's quite useful, this. But I'm not going to show it here. I've got a video, I'll leave a link below for that. We just want to focus on the visual itself. So the first thing here that's really useful and something I always look at to begin with is changing the default style. So we can change how our visual looks and feels. This is a default style that we've got here with this alternating rows, grey and white. Yeah, it's not bad, isn't it? But the one I really like to change it to is the minimal style. So the minimal style is one that extends or gets rid of these alternating rows, or just makes them the same, and adds a little bit of padding. You know, it's just a little bit of room to breathe, and just separates the values that are contained within the matrix, which makes it a little easier to read. There are lots of other styles. I probably wouldn't go near any of these. You know, some of these are just look a little bit confusing and a bit. I mean, this one here just looks as if it's going to, you know, you kind of lose track of where the actual numbers are. So I would stick with either none or minimal, or default is okay, but this is fine. Now what you can do is you can use that as a building block. So once you've set the minimal style, you can actually go and change the text sizes and change some of the other formatting. So just use it as a good solid foundation. So that's the first one. I like to change it to minimal. Let's go back in here again now. Now in the grid, so these are just the grid lines. So we can see that this minimal style has turned on the horizontal grid lines, and that's quite good. You know, we've got rid of the alternating grey and white or alternating colour between the rows, so this does help draw the eye along here. You can put on a vertical grid as well, but that's not particularly useful for this example. I like to leave it off. I quite like this minimal style. and yeah, you can change the colors, the thickness. Now, one thing that you can, a couple of options I'd just like to draw your attention to that sit in here is the padding. So we can make that bigger. We want to make it 6. It's probably too big. I think 3 is a good sort of solid number that gives it a little bit of padding but doesn't take up too much real estate. Now, this outline color is something else that I think is worth pointing out. So let me just change that to blue so we can see it as we go through. We'll change it back later, but I just want to make it obvious that this is the outline color. So here we've defined the outline color, and it basically is this here for outlining the rows and the columns. Now, we don't actually set where this outline color appears in this section here, which I found a bit odd to begin with. You set that in the rows and columns section, which we'll cover in a second. So I've set it to blue for just now. I do like it, the sort of light colour, the grey, and we'll change it back, but just so we can see this outline colour clearly, I'm going to leave it as blue just now, and we can change the weight of that. Okay, so that is all that I would look at in the grid. Next, we're going to go to the column headers. Okay, so these are the columns here, and these are the column headers section here. We've got the font, we've got the colour. Now this outline, so remember we set the outline colour in the grid section. Now this is going to tell us where we want this outline to be. So at the moment we've got bottom only. Now if I put it as a frame, we can see it's going to frame this columns here, and actually frames this one as well. So this is going to be where we decide where we want this outline to be. So you can get the top only. I think bottom only is fine. You can put none, you can switch it off. I do like to see a little bit of a separation between the column headers and the actual values. So bottom is a good option there, but you can actually decide where you want that to be. This other one here is really important, auto size. Now what happens here is if you add in new columns into this, then it's going to automatically size it to be the width of the actual value here. Now that can be a bit annoying if you add in new values. So what I would suggest is you switch this off, auto size column width, switch that off, and then make sure that you've got the word wrap on. So if that word wrap is off, you can actually set the columns and it won't change the column size. But with word wrap off, you're going to end up getting these little dots here. If something does actually, if a value for the column is larger than the width of the actual column itself, you're going to see these dots here. Now it might not be too bad, but it's not particularly great for the user or somebody reading this if you can see, if you've got to hover over it to actually see the value itself. You like to see it in the actual column. So word wrap, it's the second best option. Obviously you want it to be big enough to actually show the full category value there. And the rest of it, alignment, yeah, you can align it to the center or the right or the left, and that's just going to align this within it. So if I said center, we can see that. Auto, I'm not sure what auto actually, whether it seems to be defaulting to the left, but you can have a bit more control over how you want it to be shown. Auto seems to be fine for me for just now. And of course you can change some of the other bits and pieces here around the size and the actual font itself. Now when it comes to changing size, here's a quick hint here. You can search throughout all of the options within the format. Now if you type in text here, okay, it's going to show us everything that's got text. Now if we start changing, say, the column headers, let's go and find the column headers here. Okay, so if we start updating the column headers, it's going to update just this column header to 11. Now if you actually go to the top here and you change the grid size to 11, look what happens. It changes everything else to 11. It's probably not changing that one because we've already told it we want to specifically put it at 10. So whenever you're actually starting to change the size of these, unless you explicitly change one of these, like I just did here with this column headers, start with a grid, and then you can actually make sure they're all aligned without having to go through each one and change it manually. Would be my advice. So here we can see that's got 11. Let's see if we can change it back, if it changes back. Yes, all the other ones change back, but this one doesn't. So once you've intervened manually, you're on your own. But if you just change it from the grid, it will change everything else to be in sync with the grid value. Okay, so That is another tip there, to be able to search for text and change it all at once. And the same with font as well. If you search for font family, you can change the font family for all of them. What else have we got under column headers? I think that was it. Auto size is the key one here, and just making sure you've got that word wrap on, which is on anyway with this style we've selected. Okay, so row headers. So these are the rows here. The row headers, again, you can set the color. The options here that I think are worth looking at, and are not always as obvious, is this stepped layout. So the stepped layout is where we've got this option here, where we've got the one column here, and any of the columns that we've actually added, any of the rows we've actually added are in the same column, but they're just stepped as a layout here. Now if you prefer to see these as different columns, so you want to see the row values as different columns, then you can switch the stepped layout off under the row headers. Okay, so if you switch that off, here you can see you've got a column for each one of these. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to read it like that. Other times, if it's more of a report for exploding the data, the drill down's fine. If it's just going to be a display, then I think that's a bit of a better one, because you can actually see that it's department and discipline. Without this step layout, there's nothing really tells you that's the department, that's the discipline. It's only, you need to change this title here, which we could do. We could change it, but it's not obvious, particularly if you've maybe got 2 or 3 different levels that are different fields. It might be worth just changing that step layout. And then you can change the indent for the step layout if you've got that on. So that's going to make it bigger or smaller. So we'll leave that at 10. And I'm just going to leave that there. Now again, the outline, we set the outline color back in the grid section, and then in here is where you set where you're going to show it. Bottom only, it's going to put it at the bottom. Bottom and left. Can you do bottom and left? So you can't do bottom and right and left. Sometimes it would be good to see it bottom and left, but yeah, we've only got what we've got here, so we'll go for left only. And that just sorry, right only. There we go. And that just that's the best option, because your brain can kind of fill in the gaps here for the side and for the bottom here. It's important. You've just got that little separation between the values and the actual row headers. And then we've got this plus and minus here, which is a bit further down. If I just scroll down a bit further, there we go. So plus or minus icons. So if you want those to be available, if you're using the stepped layout, I would suggest that you use them. But otherwise, what happens is you've got to rely on people understanding how to use this, which I'll show you in a second. But it's not obvious here that there is, if you're a new user to this dashboard, it's not obvious that there's options under here. You can click on it and you can drill down, but I think if you've got that plus, it's kind of invites you to kind of press that button and to drill down and to see what's underneath it. So if you're going to use the stepped layout, I think my personal opinion is you're better to use the actual plus or minus button. If you're going to use the non-stepped layout, then it's probably okay to switch it off, because you can clearly see it's you know, that there's a department, there's a discipline, and here's the different disciplines there. Okay, so that is the kind of key options that I would draw your attention to under the row headers. Next, we're going to go into values. So these are the values that are in the actual dashboard itself. I'm just going to quickly, before we do that, I'm just going to quickly go back and switch this stepped values on again, just because I want to save some space more than anything else. Okay, so let's go and look at the headers. Sorry, the values. So this is where you can set the alternating colors. So if we go and very quickly just change the style back to default, we will see that these alternating colors have been set. So you've got the foreground and the background for the main color, and then you've got the foreground or the font in the background. And we can see that's been set to this this grey color here. So you can switch that off if you want, but I'm going to go back and just select this minimal style here. And that's going to be part of that style anyway, so that's going to switch it off as it is. This banded row, this one here is a little bit, I'm not 100% sure how you'd use this, but the idea is if we go back, if you do have that banded rows, you can actually switch off the banded rows for the column headers here. And I'm not sure why you would do that. And I'm not sure why it's under here and why it's not under the option for the row headers. But that is going to switch it off for the row headers essentially. And yeah, so that's what that option does. When we really use it, we've got this on anyway, so we're not using it as banded rows, so we don't need to use that. And then we have got show on rows. Now I'll come back to that one because I'm not 100% sure, if I'm honest, what that actually does. So we'll leave that for just now. Outline, again, we can put the outline, which is default back to that grey colour because I've selected that minimalist style. But you can put it at the bottom, and it's just going to put it at the bottom of this values section here. So I think we had none here, yeah. And then we've got the word wrap and the sort of usual suspects here. So that's the kind of key things here underneath the values. Not too much to talk about there. Next, we're going to go into totals. Okay, so there's a couple of options here. We've got totals, we've got subtotals, and we've got grand totals. So the subtotals, they're broken down into a few sub options really. So you can show row subtotals. So we're going to show the row subtotals, and as a default, they're shown at the row for each of these headers here. Okay, so yeah, we've got a row subtotal here because we're aggregating the values that are related to drilling. Now you can actually show that, or you can hide it, or you can show it, and you can actually show its position rather than being at the top. If you scroll down, you can show that value to be at the bottom. Okay, so part of me likes it at the bottom here, but another part of me likes to see it at the top because it's right next to this drilling, and we can see that it's part of that, and we've got it highlighted as part of that. So I'm not really 100% sure which one's better, but you know, you can change it to be the top or the bottom. We'll leave it at the top for just now. The only thing when you've got it at the top is there's no option to go and change the actual change the name of the row that shows the total. So if I go back to show at the bottom, we've got this option here, and then we can go and scroll up a little bit further here, and then the column subtotals, we can say we can update this to be total for department. No, sorry, wrong place. That's that one there. It's this one here, row subtotal. It's total for department. Okay, so you do have a little bit of control over the description for this row, which does make it a little bit more explicit. You know, you can see that's 2. Plus, if it's at the bottom, it kind of adds up. You know, it's how we're used to adding things up. 13 plus 1 is 14. So I'm perhaps kind of, if you're going to use subtotals here, I'm kind of perhaps, you know, this bottom bit's going to be a little bit easier to read and a little bit more logical when it comes to reading it. Okay, so the next option I want to show you is this option to, it's basically called per row level. So it's easier just to show you how that works. And to make it a bit more obvious, I'm going to add an extra field in here. So let's add in the criticality description. So now we've got 3 levels in the hierarchy. We've got the department, we've got the discipline, and we've got the different work criticality. So different codes assigned to the work, whether it's safety, whether it's routine, whether it's production, or environmentally critical work. So it's different categories. So now what we've got is we've got the ability, if we go back into this subtotals, and we go down to the row per row level, we can actually switch on subtotals or switch off subtotals for different rows. So at the moment we have got the subtotals on for all of them. Okay, so this is basically the default. If you leave this as a default, all of the different rows will have subtotals on, and you can switch them all off or you can switch them all on by changing this bit here. Okay, so we're going to switch everything off, or we're going to switch everything on. We can see right at the bottom here, we've got the grand total as well. So if you want to reduce the number of subtotals, now if when you've got a hierarchy it will get quite busy, so you probably would want to reduce the subtotals, and this is where you do it. So you click this, and then for each of the different categories that you've got, or each of the different rows you've got, so we've got department, discipline, and work criticality description here. Let's move it up a little bit. We can decide whether we want to switch these on or off. So here we can see that we've got this title here, so we need to change that title actually. Let's change it back to something a bit more generic. Just leave it as just leave it as total for just now. It might make sense to change that if you're just going to be using it for one thing, but for this example here it's going to be repeated 3 times. We've got a total here, we've got a total here, so yeah, we don't want that total to be shown too many times. So let's turn it off for our work criticality. So we're going to see that getting turned off. Okay, so we don't want to see it for work criticality, we just want to see it, the totals aggregated at this department level here, which is, or sorry, the discipline level here. Okay, now if we want to turn it off for discipline, then we're just going to see it there, and we're just going to see it at the very bottom for each department, which is really the grand total at the bottom here. If we just scroll down, and if we turn it off for department, you can see it's essentially turning off the grand total. Okay, so you've just got a little bit more control over which of these you see, and which ones you hide, and again you can change the position of those. So I'm just going to leave it as it was, and I'm going to get rid of this again because it's just a bit too confusing. Right, so what have we got now? We've got the drilling, we've got the total here. The next thing we've got is the column totals, so pretty much the same idea. If we go to subtotals, and we've got the columns, so you can switch those on or off, you can change it. You can see that change that to column. Okay, so you can change that column if you want, and I'll just leave it as total for just now. And again, if you've got multiple different columns, then you can go in and change this here per column level. We've only got the work order status code here, but you would see the different columns here. If you had different columns, and I wouldn't advise that because it's going to get quite complicated quite quickly, but you could turn off and on subtotals for different columns if you needed to, and that would be the place to go and do that. So that's the subtotals. Next we've got the grand total, and that is fairly straightforward. It's just once you switch off and on the grand totals, I don't think you actually switch it off and on here. I think the grand totals are actually switched off at this level here, because if you want to switch off the grand total, it's actually switched off using, let's switch that one off, that per level. So in here you can actually, the grand total is the department, okay, because that's the first level. So you switch it off and on here, but you actually configure it. If you go back and minimize that, you configure the grand total here, and that's the only thing that does, it configures it. So if we change that, it's just going to change that grand total here. So we'll default to the normal value there. Yeah, so this grand total is really just for formatting it, and if you change the format here and you want to apply it to the labels, for example, if we change that there, and you just want to quickly apply that to labels, don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can apply it to the labels as well, and it just converges these here. Okay, so that's what this apply to labels does, and it's on all of the different options. You'll have noticed that as we're going through it. Okay, so we're working through here, field formatting. So this is, as it says, we can go and change the formatting of these different fields. So let's go and change this to blue, and we can see that it's actually the fields within the values that we're actually updating here, and you can decide whether you want to apply these to the headers and to the subtotals, and and that just allows you to look at, if I applied it to here, applied it to the total, so that'll be the bottom there, yeah. Apply it to the header, apply it to subtotals as a video on. So yeah, you can actually, it just helps you to manage these a bit quicker and align any formatting changes that you make to the other one. So nothing too drastic in there. And then it comes to conditional formatting. So we're going to spend a bit of time looking at this conditional formatting. So before we start applying some conditional formatting, what I'd always advise you to do is take a step back and say, what problems or opportunities do we want to draw the person who's looking at this visualization? What do we want to draw their attention to? So in this example here, we're looking at the count of the number of work orders that are in our backlog. So work that's overdue, should have been completed, but it's not, it's overdue. So high is a bad thing. If there's a lot of work in a particular, generally speaking, if there's a lot of work somewhere, it's a bottleneck and it's a place we should be focusing on, looking if we can move it forward through the process. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one here. We want to draw the attention to the highest value and make sure that the people can see that. Now it's not obvious here. If you're just looking in here and you're thinking, okay, well, where is our highest value here? For the start, it's probably too much data, so we'd want to go and actually minimize everything. And we want to be able to see, right, okay, where's the highest value here? Well, there's 200 here, there's 200, so we can see these are the two highest values, along with this 500, but it doesn't pull you straight into it. Okay, so conditional format, and the purpose is to pull you straight to the problems, or straight to the areas that you want to focus on. So I'm going to use the background, and I'm going to use a heat map in this example here. So most of the conditional formatting is done the same. I am going to create another video because there's quite a lot in here. I'm just going to give you a flavour here of how I would set it up. So the default has been this this blue colour here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to change that to be, well, let's look at the options here. We're going to use a colour scale. We're going to conditional format based on the background count, and we're going to go from the lowest value, which is going to be white, to the highest value, which is going to be this red colour here. And just make sure that is selected this way. Yep, here we go. And then I'm going to click on OK. Now it's got this option here, default formatting as 0. Don't format. Yeah, so basically we're going to leave that as 0 because 0 is the lowest number. If it's blank, then we want it to be effectively 0. And we're just going to default that. We're just going to conditionally format the actual values to begin with. And here we can see straight away, we can see there's two issues here. Without even reading the numbers, I can see that there's an issue here and there's an issue here. Okay, so that's the power of using conditional format to draw us to the areas. Now if I then open up this maintenance, again it's going to help me to, it's going to get rid of the conditional formatting because we've now drilled it down. So this total is no longer conditionally formatted. We can conditionally format this total, but there's an issue with that I'll show you in a second. But now we've drilled into this maintenance, which has got the biggest backlog, and we can see straight away where the big issues are. Instrumentation, and we can see that work that's scheduled and work that's waiting scheduled are big issues here. And mechanical is waiting scheduled, and we've got mechanical scheduled work. So straight away, bang, we're in and we're able to see where the problems are. Okay, so that's the power of conditional formatting. And we can do it with the font, we could do it with data bars. Data bars, I think I'm going to cover those, and icons, I'll cover those in a different video because there's quite a lot involved in it, and this video is long enough as it is. So yeah, that's a conditional formatting section there, just a little bit of a flavour for that. I am going to create a dedicated course on conditional formatting. It's going to take you through how to conditionally format and set up your own KPI tracking system. So I'll leave a link below when I release that, and you can check that out. It's going to be really useful. If you want to conditionally format the totals, just before we wrap up here, you can, and let's go back into advanced, and we've got the option here to conditionally format just the totals or the values in totals. Now the only problem is, if you're conditionally formatting the values, then you can choose the lowest and you can choose the highest value, which is the custom. So Power BI will look through the highest and the lowest value in the values that are displayed, and it will conditionally format them based on whatever the highest value is and the lowest value. So it's all relative. The highest value will be red, and there'll be a gradient applied right through to the lowest value, which will be white. However, for some reason, the totals, you've got to put a custom value in. Now, that's a bit of an issue, because if you've got a custom value of, say, 0, perfect. We know that 0 is the best case. But if we've got an unclear maximum, okay, so the maximum here could be anything. It could be 300 or 200, and it was at the high 200s, or it could be, if we drill down a little bit further, it could be that the relative highest value could be into the low hundreds. So if I put in here, this value here as being, say, that the top value as being 250. Click in here. What it does is it actually maxes it out. So I've done the totals here, and it's maxed out each one of these as being red because it's gone over the 250. It's only applying a gradient below 250. So yeah, it's not going to be perhaps great. You'd like it to have been the same as it is for the values, where it looks at the highest total, looks at the lowest total, and then gives you a gradient across the totals there. But yeah, you can conditionally format the totals, but I think it's probably more useful to do these anyway. Okay, so I think that's gave us a little bit, let's hopefully give you a bit of an idea. The rest of them are fairly straightforward. Is there anything in here that the title, the background, the border, the shadow? Most of these are things that are available for every matrix, so I'm not going to go into that in too much detail just now. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you would like to subscribe to my videos and keep up to date with the latest releases, I release a video more or less every week, then click that subscribe button and you'll get a notification whenever I release a new video. And just one final word, if you want to learn how to use Power BI, I've got a free course which I'll leave below, a link below too. It's on YouTube. And yeah, it takes about an hour and a half to go through it, and it's going to set you right up and give you a good solid foundation for creating your own dashboard. In fact, you will create this dashboard here, and yeah, you're going to go from nothing to understanding how to create this dashboard in about an hour and a half. So check that out as well if you're new to Power BI and want to learn a bit more. Apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.